as I said, today is the second last talk that we will do on Herbert Howells. And then next week we will do a talk on two composers, both named Judith. Judith Weir and Judith Bingham, both contemporary Anglican and mainstream composers too.
Hmm.
So that should be interesting. I've learned a lot just researching that. There, you should be able to see my screen here. Howells, there he is. He was born in 1892 and lived long life and died in 1983. He was born in Gloucestershire in a little village called Lydney, the youngest of 6 children. His father played the organ at a local Baptist church, and Herbert himself showed early musical promise, first substituting for his father and then moving to the local COE, Church of England Parish Church, as a choir boy and unofficial deputy organist. His father, who was a painter and a decorator, he filed for bankruptcy when Herbert was 12, which was a deep humiliation in this small community at the time, and from which Howells never fully recovered. Financially, he was assisted by a family friend who had taken an interest in the budding musician, and Herbert began music lessons in 1905 with another Herbert Brewer, the organist at Gloucester Cathedral, and at 16 became his articled pupil, which back in the day, they had this system. They're kind of the unofficial protege, articled pupil. You see a lot of composers around this era had that title, alongside 2 people named Ivor Novello and Ivor Gurney. You may have heard of Ivor Gurney. He was a poet and a musician. And Ivor Novello, he was really famous for a music publishing company that he started, Novello, and that now is most famous for publishing the scores of the Messiah. So the Novello company is still kind of living their legacy through the publishing company. Herbert Howells and Ivor Gurney became close friends. The pair would go on long walks through the Gloucestershire countryside, discussing their shared love of music and English literature. Another formative experience for the young Howells was the premiere in September of 1910 at the Gloucester Three Choirs Festival of Ralph Vaughan Williams' Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis. And we talked about that moment 2 weeks ago when we talked about Vaughan Williams. So Howells was at that premiere and he was deeply affected by that. He would like to relate in after years how Vaughan Williams sat next to him for the remainder of the concert and shared his score of Elgar's Dream of Gerontius and was awestruck with the awestruck aspiring composer. Both Vaughan Williams and the Tudor composers, including Tallis, profoundly influenced Howells's later work. In 1912, following the example of Gurney, Howells moved to London to study at the Royal College of Music, where his teachers would include Charles Stanford, Hubert Parry, who we talked about last week or the week before, and Charles Wood. Howells blossomed in what he considered the cozy family atmosphere of the college, and his Mass in the Dorian mode was performed at Westminster Cathedral, which is the Catholic cathedral down the street from Westminster Abbey, under Richard Terry, within weeks of his arrival in London. So this was really an important connection that he made with Terry, because he would, as we will see later, work with Terry in reviving Tudor music, English Tudor music. Howells's promise seemed likely to be cut short in 1915 when he was diagnosed with Graves' disease and given only 6 months to live. His poor health prevented him from being conscripted into World War I, arguably preserving him from the worst fate awaiting Gurney and others of his friends and contemporaries, many who were injured or killed during that war. In 1917, Howells became assistant organist at Salisbury Cathedral, but only held the post for a few months, finding the repeated journeys to London for treatment too difficult. Friends then arranged for a grant from the Carnegie Trust, which paid for Howells to assist Terry in editing the Latin Tudor repertoire that Terry and his choir were reviving at Westminster Cathedral. And so you have to remember that a lot of this music, Tudor music during this time in the early 1900s, were really not being performed. The music of Byrd and Tallis and Richard Shepherd and John Fairfax. And Richard Terry was one of the foremost revivers of this music, just like Mendelssohn revived the music of Bach. So Howells kind of got on that train, and he discovered these manuscripts, and he really took a liking to them, and that would influence his music later on. His first significant works for choir, the 3 carol anthems, which include Here is the Little Door, A Spotless Rose, and Sing Lullaby, 2 of which our choir has sung in the past, were written around this time. In 1920, Howells married Dorothy Daw, and they had 2 children, Ursula, and later an actress, and Michael. In the same year, he joined the staff of the Royal College of Music, where he was to remain until 1979, so quite a long career at the RCM. The post at the RCM, which from 1925 he combined with the position of Director of Music at St. Paul's Girls' School, and frequent work as a competition adjudicator, was to reduce the amount of time he could devote to composition. In September of 1935, Howells' placid existence was abruptly shattered when his 9-year-old son, Michael, contracted polio during a family holiday, and he died 3 days later. Howells was deeply affected and continued to commemorate the event until the end of his life. At the suggestion of his daughter Ursula, he sought to channel his grief into music, and over the next 3 years composed much of the large-scale choral work, which was eventually to become a work called Hymnus Paradisi, drawing on material from the still unpublished Requiem. So now I'd like to play the hymn, which most of us know, called All My Hope on God Is Founded. This, I'm playing this because the tune name of this is called Michael, and Howells wrote this as a dedication to his son who had just died at the young age of 9. This video is from 2010 when the Pope visited England, and there was a joint prayer service with him and the Archbishop of Canterbury at Westminster Abbey. So this is Howells' hymn, All My Hope on God Is Founded. The words are by Robert Bridges, the poet laureate of England at the time, music is by Howells. It's good to see all those Catholics singing this very Anglican hymn.
Hmm.
So that hymn was written by Howells, and one one of the one of the musical characteristics of Howells is long vocal lines. So oftentimes the choir complains that Howells's music has these really impossible lines that they can't sing all on one breath. They have to kind of take a breath in the middle of it. And his that's kind of his characteristic writing. He just likes these really long flowing lines. They're not short little chunks like some other composers. He likes the arc. And we'll see later that a lot of his music is echoing architecture and the buildings that he writes for and the choirs which inhabit those buildings. So he customizes his music towards a certain place depending on whether it's a small place or a large place. And so that's one of his really musical characteristics. From the late 1930s, Howells turned increasingly to choral and organ music, composing a second series of psalm preludes followed by a set of 6 pieces, of which the third, Master Tallis's Testament, a particular favorite of the composer's, recalled his formative experience of Vaughan Williams's Tallis Fantasia. Notice the theme here, both are paying homage to the great Thomas Tallis. A set of 4 anthems originally entitled In Time of War and including the popular O Pray for the Peace of Jerusalem and Like as the Heart followed in early 1941. Like as the Heart is probably one of the more famous of Howells's short anthems for choir because it's pretty accessible, taking words from Psalm 42. In August of that year, Howells was invited to serve as acting organist of St. John's College, Cambridge, replacing Robin Orr, who was away on active duty in World War II. Howells' association with Cambridge, which lasted from until the end of the war in 1945, was a productive and happy period for him and led directly to the works for which he is most remembered. He later recalled being challenged by the Dean of King's College, Eric Milner White, who was famous for creating the service of 9 lessons and carols that we all know today, to write a set of canticles for the choir. The result was the Te Deum and Jubilate of this service, known as Collegium Regale, which in Latin means King's College, performed in 1944, followed by the next year of the Magen Nunc, which completed the office of Holy Communion. And I want to play a short clip of this, which is sung here by the College of Trinity College, Cambridge, which is just down the street from King's and St. John's. This was when they were on their tour, USA tour, 6 years ago, and they were singing at St. Philip's Cathedral in Atlanta. And they are probably one of the best choirs out there in the world today. And they're just great. They're singing the Te Deum by Howells, and we'll just play a short clip of this. that was just the first part of the 10-minute Te Deum. So did you notice that they were singing without music, singing memorized? So that's pretty impressive for such a complex piece. And they actually sing a lot of their music memorized. They prepare for it all year, and then they are able to sing a lot of their pieces on tour memorized. Sorry, I was just choking on my tea earlier. That's a choir that I want to bring to Norfolk someday, but they like to tour in September, which is not a great time. Now, so that was the set by Howells, written for King's College. We'll learn that Howells was actually commissioned by many different cathedrals, chapels to write music for their choir. And if I just scroll down, these are the settings that he wrote, and many of them have a place to them. So, for instance, 1946, he wrote a Magnum Nunc for Gloucester Cathedral, Canterbury Cathedral, New College, Oxford, St. Paul, Worcester, St. George's Chapel, Windsor, and they're not only in England. We've got here St. Paul's Church, Columbia University in New York. We've got here the Dallas Canticles and Washington National Cathedral. So he was busy writing for all these places, and he kind of customized the music for that location, given the resources, given the architecture of that place. In addition to the Collegium Regale, the one written for King's College, the Gloucester service and the St. Paul's service remained the best known and most admired settings of the many settings of the Anglican liturgy written by Howells for particular choirs and buildings over the next 30 years. And at the end of this talk, I will play the Gloucester service for you, but I want to save it to the end. Right there. Okay, so in 1949, the organist Herbert Sumption asked Howells if he had anything that could be performed at the 1950 Three Choirs Festival to be held at Gloucester. Howells decided to bring out the incomplete choral work he had written in his son Michael's memory between 36 and 38. The work, retitled Hymnus Paradisi at Sumption's suggestion, was completed and orchestrated in time for the first performance in September of 1950, the day after the 15th anniversary of Michael's death. It was Howells' greatest public and critical success, and for many years was his best known work. The motet Take Him Earth for Cherishing, a posthumous title to tribute to President John F. Kennedy, was written in late spring of 1964. This piece is written for a cappella choir. It's pretty complex. It takes about 12 or 13 minutes to sing, and it's a wonderful piece. Not a lot of choirs do it just because it's not that practical for a service, but this was written after JFK was assassinated. It was premiered as part of the Canadian tribute to Kennedy at Washington's National Gallery of Art, sung by the choir of St. George's Cathedral, Kingston, Ontario. Take Him Earth is described by Howells' pupil Paul Spicer as a classic of 20th century choral music and an undoubted masterpiece. Howells died in February of 1983 at the age of 90, pretty good when he was only given 6 months to live, in a nursing home in Putney, one day after his good friend, Sir Adrian Boult, a famous conductor, and his ashes were interred in Westminster Abbey. So there's a picture of Howells, his younger days, and we've seen this picture, Kindred Spirits, Howells and Vaughan Williams, at a Three Choirs Festival in the 50s. and they're sharing, probably talking about Tallis or something like that. Here's a little line drawing of him that we see. A lot of music that music publishers put out today have this line drawing or one similar to this. And these are his, this is his grave at Westminster Abbey. CH, I think, stands for Companion of Honor. Now, the choir was lucky to tour England in 2016, and we went to Norwich and Gloucester cathedrals. And in the Lady Chapel of Gloucester, they have these old windows. You can see the top of the window is all just fragments of glass that they put together, but they created these new panels here. And you can't really see it that clearly, but the music of Howells is featured in these panes. So the one on the left right here is Like as the Heart. And this one says My Soul, which is a tribute to his many settings of the Mag and Nunc. And this one here is Taken Earth for Cherishing, which is written for JFK. And this one says, I think it says Holy. So I'm not exactly sure which one that one is. I think it's another piece. So anyways, they have memorialized Howells in the stained glass. And this was only probably in the last 20 years. And this bottom one is a tribute to Herbert Sumption, which was the organist at Gloucester and had a nice relationship with Howells. So if you're ever in Gloucester, you can see these in the Lady Chapel that are dedicated to them. Just looking at this list of works that he wrote, a lot of Magnificat and Nunc Dimittis, which are obviously written for the evening prayer, evensong. And then there are hymn tunes. The one that we listen to is Michael, All My Hope on God is Founded. But as you can see, he wrote a handful of other hymn tunes. And then he wrote a lot of anthems. The one that I talked about was Like as the Heart. But you can see there's quite a bit of anthems. And then lesser known are his orchestral works and chamber works. So he did write stuff for orchestra without voices and chamber works for small ensemble. He wrote keyboard works and also a whole bunch of organ works. And then the big chorus and orchestra works. Behold, O God, our defender, I believe was sung at the coronation. And then all of these other pieces, including that big piece, Hymnus Paradisi. So Herbert Howells is not particularly a mainstream composer that if you ask, members of the Virginia Symphony Orchestra, they may not know the name Herbert Howells, or they may have only, heard of him in passing. But he is really mostly known as an Anglican composer, pieces for the church, pieces for choir and organ, and specifically for the Anglican Church. If you ask a Baptist or a Methodist, they might not know who Herbert Howells is. And it's just that he kind of found his niche writing for Anglican choirs, and it's really become a cult in the Anglican choral tradition. And perhaps some other choirs of denominations sing his music, but not a lot. And I think a lot of it has to do with architecture and just resources, organ, the need for big buildings to make his music really atmospheric. And that's kind of what he's known for. Vince, were you going to say something?
No, I thought he ran for governor of Virginia, but go on.
Henry Howells.
Is that another Howells?
That was Henry.
Otherwise known as Howell and Henry.
Yeah. So anyways, I encourage you to, look at his music, listen to it, look things up on YouTube. His really wonderful kind of rhapsodic music that you can really hear the English countryside in it. You can hear soaring vaults and architecture in it. And we love to sing it. It's not easy to sing, but it really works well within the liturgy. It's kind of custom. It is customized for the liturgy. And so that's why I think Anglican choirs have really taken a liking to his music. And good old Herbie is here to stay.
Maybe you could do that Kentish yeoman's wooing songs at communion someday.
Maybe. So I want to now play for you the Magnificat from his Gloucester service. And the choir has sung this on tour at Gloucester Cathedral. So it was really special for us in 2016 when we went to Gloucester to sing that work in the space in which it was was written for. This video is of not of the Gloucester Choir, but it sounds nice and it has a kind of nice slideshow of different parts of Gloucester. So I picked this one just because it has some visual that you can follow along with. Well, we've got time, so I'll just play the whole thing, which is about 6 minutes long. And it's the Magnificat, which is My Soul, the Song of Mary, when she finds out she's gonna have the baby Jesus.
and bolted. That's spectacular.
Mhm.